All right, buckle up, because we're diving deep into a market that just can't seem to sit still. Earnings calls are flying, economic indicators are flashing, and some major players are making headlines.
It's true. You've got your usual Friday data dumps, building permits, housing starts, even the September federal budget.
But what's really got me glued to the screen is the action happening over at companies like Netflix, CVS, Procter & Gamble, even Tesla. Talk about a wild ride.
What's interesting is how these seemingly separate stories can actually give us a snapshot of what's going on in the bigger picture. You see how companies are adapting to changes in consumer behavior, economic uncertainty. You even see geopolitical events starting to factor in.
Speaking of shakeups, let's jump right into the drama unfolding at CVS. They're switching CEOs, Karen Lynch is out, and a company veteran, David Joyner, is stepping in.
Oh yeah, that definitely caught my eye too. It's no secret that CVS has been facing some challenges, but to swap out the CEO.
Right, that's a pretty big move. I'm really curious to see what Joyner's vision for the company is, especially with healthcare costs being such a hot topic these days.
It'll be interesting to see how he tackles that.
Now, while CVS is hitting the reset button, Netflix seems to have cracked the code. Their subscriber numbers are through the roof, blowing past all their predictions. And get this, they're crediting part of that success to Squid Game. Remember those costumes everyone was rocking last Halloween?
How could you forget?
Well, get ready for round 2, because the hype is back. Netflix knows what they're doing.
And you know what else is smart? That ad-supported plan they rolled out, it's genius, really. They're pulling in a whole new crowd of subscribers who maybe couldn't justify the full price but still want to get in on the action. With all the competition in the streaming world, that kind of flexibility is key.
Absolutely. They're giving people what they want at a price they can stomach. But speaking of wallets, not every company is navigating this economic landscape quite as smoothly. Procter & Gamble, they're the brains behind brands like Tide, Crest, Gillette, all those household names.
I'm familiar with them. What's going on?
Well, they missed their sales targets. Seems like a lot of us are tightening the purse strings and opting for cheaper alternatives at the checkout.
Makes sense, though, doesn't it? When things feel a bit uncertain, you start looking for ways to save a buck or two. And those little choices can actually reveal some big trends.
It's like a domino effect.
It really is. It's going to be fascinating to see if this trend continues and how these big consumer companies adapt.
Speaking of adapting, let's switch gears from those everyday essentials to the high-stakes world of Tesla. Their self-driving software is under the microscope right now, facing an investigation by safety regulators.
Oh, right, after those collisions.
Yeah, and one of them, unfortunately, was fatal. So now it's a question of how reliable is this technology really, especially when you throw in things like bad weather conditions.
Right, because it's one thing to have this cutting-edge technology, but are we jumping the gun before it's really ready for prime time? This case with Tesla could have huge implications for the entire self-driving vehicle industry.
It's a big deal for sure. And you know what else is a bit of a balancing act? The fact that American Express is reporting a surge in profits. Turns out a lot of us are swiping that plastic more than ever.
Well, that's good for business, I guess, but it does make you wonder, is this a sign of confidence in the economy, or are we headed for trouble?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, more spending can be a sign that people feel good about the economy, but you're right, interest rates are going up. It's almost like walking a tightrope, isn't it?
It really is. And speaking of tricky situations, did you catch that story about Samsung Electronics? They're putting their new chip-making factory in Texas on hold. Oh yeah, I saw that. It seems like they haven't lined up enough big customers to justify going full steam ahead just yet.
It's a pretty major delay for such a big project. Makes you wonder what's going on behind the scenes.
It's all about supply and demand, really. When Samsung postpones their orders from ASML, that's a big deal because ASML basically has a monopoly on a certain type of equipment, really specialized stuff for making those advanced chips.
So Samsung pumping the brakes on their factory. Does that mean the chip shortage we've been hearing so much about might be easing up?
Well, it's possible. It does seem like we're past that peak of panic, but the semiconductor industry, it's a beast, you know? It's global, it's complex, and something unexpected could always throw things out of whack.
Like that conflict in the Middle East, for example. I was reading that Coca-Cola and PepsiCo are having some supply chain headaches because of it.
Yes, that situation is really throwing a wrench in things. That key border crossing in Jordan that they rely on, it's closed down, isn't it? Sugar, cans, all those essential supplies for their bottling plants, they're stuck.
Exactly. It's a stark reminder of how interconnected everything is.
It really is. I mean, who would have thought a conflict thousands of miles away could end up impacting whether we have our favorite soda?
It makes you appreciate the complexity of the global market, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, are we about to see a soda shortage? What are Coke and Pepsi doing about this?
Well, they're not sitting idly by, that's for sure. Their bottlers are scrambling, trying to find other ways to get those supplies. But of course, that's not always easy, and it definitely costs more. It just goes to show how fragile these global supply chains can be.
I'll think twice next time I grab a soda, that's for sure. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but before we wrap up, let's take a look at Wall Street. What's the overall sentiment as we head into the weekend?
Well, despite all the ups and downs we've talked about, the market seemed to be in a surprisingly decent mood. I mean, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, it's up a bit, and the Nasdaq. Well, since that's driven by tech companies, those gains are looking even better. Investors are digging into those corporate earnings reports, trying to make sense of it all.
And what's the verdict?
For now, it seems like the good news is outweighing the bad, at least for today. But one story that really caught my eye, and not exactly in a good way, is that lawsuit against Archer Daniels Midland.
ADM, the agricultural giant.
The one and only. It's a tragic situation, really. You might remember that worker who was seriously injured in that explosion at one of their grain processing facilities?
Oh yeah, last year, right. That was awful.
Well, now they're facing this lawsuit alleging they didn't take the right precautions, that they didn't properly inspect and maintain their safety systems, and that might have led to the whole thing.
Those are serious allegations. Has ADM said anything about the lawsuit?
They've been pretty quiet so far, no official statement or anything, but I have a feeling this is going to be a big one. Cases like this, they often shine a light on an entire industry, make everyone take a closer look at their own safety practices.
It's a powerful reminder that behind all those profits and stock prices, there are real people. And sometimes those people pay the price when things go wrong.
It's easy to forget that, isn't it? Caught up in the numbers and all.
It is. Okay, so before we move on to completely different topics, let's loop back to the semiconductor world for a moment. Wall Street analysts are really focusing on this sector right now. I mean, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, hasn't it? It really has. So what should we be watching out for in the coming weeks? Any particular companies or trends on your radar?
Well, keep your eye on Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. TSMC, they're the big dogs, the biggest contract chip maker out there.
Right, they make chips for other companies, don't they?
Exactly. And their earnings reports always get people talking. Just recently, they announced record high share prices.
Wow, record high. In this climate, that's really saying something. What's fueling that kind of growth?
They're in the perfect position to ride this wave of AI technology. Everyone's jumping on that bandwagon. And all that AI, it needs chips. The advanced kind that TSMC specializes in. Looks like they saw this coming.
Smart move. But they're not out of the woods entirely, right? Wasn't there some kind of investigation going on, something to do with TSMC?
You got a good memory. The U.S. Commerce Department is looking into whether they might have bent the rules a bit, selling advanced chips to Huawei. That's the Chinese tech giant, the one.
Right. Huawei's been in hot water lately. So this investigation throws another curveball into the mix. Semiconductors aren't just about tech anymore. It's about global politics, too.
Exactly. It's a tangled web. Speaking of complicated situations with a lot at stake, let's talk tobacco. Remember that huge lawsuit in Canada, the one against all those big tobacco companies?
Oh, yeah, that's been going on forever. What's happening with that now?
Well, get this. Philip Morris International, British American Tobacco, and Japan Tobacco, they all agreed to a settlement.
They did. Finally. How much are we talking?
A cool $32.5 billion, Canadian dollars, that is.
That's a lot of money. It's been so long. Remind me what the lawsuit was about.
It was about the health impacts of smoking, plain and simple. The big question was, should these companies be on the hook for the costs of treating all those smoking-related illnesses? It's been a long and contentious battle.
So they're paying up, but does that mean they're admitting they did something wrong?
That's the thing. They're not actually admitting any guilt, but the fact that they're willing to shell out that kind of money, it speaks volumes. It's a big win for the people who brought the lawsuit, and you can bet it'll have everyone in the tobacco industry watching their backs.
Wow. Definitely one for the history books. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from CEOs jumping ship to supply chains going haywire, and even the future of AI. But before we wrap things up, I want to bring it back down to earth for a sec, to our own wallets. With everything going on, interest rates going up, well, it makes you think about how to manage your money, right?
It's a good time to get real with your finances, that's for sure. First things first, take a good hard look at your budget. Do you really need that subscription? Could you pack your lunch a few days a week? You'd be surprised how those small changes add up.
Every penny counts, right?
You got it. And speaking of pennies, with interest rates climbing like they are, if you've got credit card debt, now is the time to tackle that beast.
Makes sense. What about investing? Is now a good time to be putting money in the market, or should we be playing it safe?
That's a tricky one. Honestly, the best thing is to talk to a financial advisor. They'll know your situation, how much risk you're comfortable with, what your goals are. They can give you personalized advice. But as a general rule of thumb, diversification is key. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And think long term, Don't get caught up in the day-to-day fluctuations.
Solid advice. Anything else we should keep in mind?
Make sure you've got a little nest egg stashed away, an emergency fund. Ideally, 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses, just in case life throws you a curveball.
It's always better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And remember, the more you know, the better off you'll be. Keep learning about the market, keep learning about managing your money, and you'll be ready for anything.
I love it. Knowledge is power, as they say. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Everything from corporate shakeups to the latest developments in the ongoing saga of the global market. What a ride.
It's never boring, that's for sure. And that's why we do what we do.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from all of this?
Stay curious. The world of business and finance is always changing. The more you learn about it, the more you understand the forces shaping our world, the better equipped you'll be to navigate those changes and even find those hidden opportunities.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this roller coaster ride through the market today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of business and finance.